Welcome, Thomas Spiegel and Fabien Mace, I would hope.
Mace.
I'm sorry. Okay.
One beer.
Okay. Thanks a lot for being here, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm Fabien Mace. I'm leading the APG team in France. I'm really excited to be here for the 10th anniversary of the Apidays. I'm very excited to be with Thomas Spiegel, Group CEO, Data and Architecture from L'Oréal, and to have the opportunity to share the L'Oréal story today. As an introduction, I wanted to share what we see on the market today. It is true that as we are in the API community, API first transformation are driving our day-to-day and our activities. What we see today on the market is that there is a digital first shift on which all the businesses want to do more with less, and where APIs become more and more critical. What we see also is to get, as it was said, the business outcome of a real API first transformation. We think there are pillars and true story we wanted to share with you today. One of them is to be able to align this API first transformation with a data first strategy. This is something L'Oréal had decided to put in place, and I think it's important they can give you a testimonial around that. And it was said before, to try to be in a better world and to have a day-to-day impact, putting sustainability at first in every initiative is also something you can leverage and in which API can play a significant role. So, Thomas, if you agree, you can give the L'Oréal story let's say, try to do it in 20 minutes, and then at the end we can have a Q&A session with you in the room. Thomas?
With pleasure. So first, let's have a seat. So now, thank you to be here with us today, and I could not resist just and first to spend a few seconds with you on what is L'Oréal, because I believe you're all a very good customer of L'Oréal, but perhaps you don't know the magnitude of the L'Oréal group. So L'Oréal, and it's well known for that, is obviously the number one in beauty worldwide. Meaning, being number one does mean that we have to stay number one. We have to stay always ahead of the race. L'Oréal is present everywhere in the world. It's a true worldwide company, meaning any services, any data must be delivered globally around all of these places. And that's where the world of the API logic come into the loop. L'Oréal has to distribute its 7 billion products to 1.2, 1.3 billion consumers through various channels. It is still a physical business with brick and mortar, but more and more e-commerce. E-commerce is nearly representing 30% of our sales. And obviously, more and more after the COVID time, back on the travel retail. What does it mean? It means that we have to be able to follow up our consumer, whether they are offline, whether they are online, whether they are traveling all around the world. API has an interesting story around that. And L'Oréal is organized around 4 different go-to-market, whether it's Luxe, whether it's active cosmetic, whether it's CPD, mass market, or whether it's what we call the professional product, hair product. So it means that we have also to have a way to address all these different go-to-market in a seamless manner. And all of that with 35 global brands. So you have all understood that when we multiply all the axes of this matrix, it means that we have to be particularly agile in order to make that happening in a consistent way for a consistent experience for our consumer. So now, a few years ago, we did decide to plug something new. and it was called the Beauty Tech Ambition. So what is the Beauty Tech Ambition? Beauty Tech Ambition means that we no longer want to be only the #1 cosmetic company in the world, but also to be the beauty tech leader. What does it mean? It means that we have to make sure that we are using all the promise of technology around the world in order to reshape our experience, our services, our product. More clearly, it means that we have to invent a new experience for our consumer, meaning be able not only to sell the product, but to sell an experience on the way to use the product, on the way to buy the product, on the way to find the product wherever they are in the world. And we have also, because we like the concept of Parisization, to give for our own employees the same experience, an enriched experience. To make that happening, what do we need? First of all, to place tech at several places in the company. Secondly, to make our data, which is a rich asset. We are an over 100 years old company, so we have a lot of data, but we have to unleash the power of data so that it can be used in a very seamless manner. And at the same time, to continue to enrich our data asset more and more. And last but not least, we have to make sure that each of our organization, our employee, do pivot in a way to use this technology in an easy manner. Once again, API looks as a good solution for it. So all of that do trigger this API first logic that was decided 3 years ago. So how does it start? You have here what we call our house of transformation. In order to make that happening, we have created what we call engine, which are on one side the tech foundation that encompass enterprise architecture principle, looking for the way we can apply at every stage of our engine cloud-first strategy and API-first strategy. All of that with some other topics, I will not look at it. But you see also at the third scale, the data platform, the data ready. So the need for a group like L'Oréal to be equipped with a global data platform.
Yeah, on that, Thomas, I think what was really interesting is that you decided to do the big bets at the same time to get a maximum of outcomes, and this is what happens, in fact.
It's exactly the truth. That's what happens. We did decide at the same time to unleash the power of data through the APIs. And you will see how then the sustainability aspect is somehow everywhere in each of these engines. So what was clear is that to make that happening, several principles were applied on each of the engines. The multi-cloud approach, the AI everywhere approach, wherever it can bring value. Obviously, a strong move to agile, not 100%, but whenever it can make the difference. The real-time logic, and that's where, because we wanted to move to a true real-time decision-making process, both on our consumption of data, but on the way we interact with all the ecosystem. That's where the API first is, definitely. CyberSec, and obviously compliancy with data privacy things, which is another very interesting topic because we, in many cases, as a worldwide group, we have to leave the data, the residency of the data in several places to comply strictly with the rules. And somehow the way to interact or to be able to consume aggregated data from these places is also through an API-first strategy. So now let's enter a bit more in the reality on how do we make that happening. So first of all, it's a decision taken now 3 big years ago to move and to make several steps. The API first strategy was one of the first guiding decisions that was made. So all around all of these steps, that I will not comment for the sake of time, the API first is a prerequisite for each of the steps we are doing. What does it mean and how do we make that happening? First of all, it's a must, as you have understood, that's the architecture of choice because of the omni-channel needs and because of the full mobility needs for our solution. It's a way for us, and it's very interesting, to activate a new distribution channel. I will take, for instance, the example of social selling in China, when during the crisis we had to activate it very quickly. It's possible thanks to this strategy. It's very important. I was speaking with the online plus offline consistency of the consumer experience. That's the way to have an experience as consistent as possible. It's about the way to foster innovation within the group. Anybody can create an API and make it available on our overall portal. And this portal do communicate to a vast community, internal and external, more and more open, obviously. The benefits are pretty obvious, and I imagine that in this room you all share it. It's about harmonization, it's about reuse, it's about standardization. When we speak about reuse, we start to touch a bit the question of sustainability. The more an asset is being reused, the better it is, obviously, and we'll come back to it.
If it's the right asset, right?
If it is the right asset, obviously. Let's speak about the challenge. Governance is a must, and as you will see, we aim at going over the chain of governance from technical API to service API to API as a product, which is obviously deeply linked with the quality of the governance we can apply to our assets. Security is absolutely non-negotiable, so it's important when choosing the right way. And obviously, the design of API, we are still learning sometimes, but it's something which has to be put into with the right level of attention. So here you have a bit a more technical slide, which is heavily interested. It's more on the specific link on our global data platform, mainly put on a Google Cloud Platform for the L'Oréal Group, and the way we couple it with the APG in order to make sure that the governance of this business API is being made, and in order to make sure that we mesh the several data sources that we have, and you can imagine that at the size of L'Oréal, we have quite a couple, whether they are internal and external, in order for them to be consumed by the product you see on the top part of the cloud. So it's very important for us, and it's really the technical backbone that make all of this very nice story I was explaining possible. Let's come back a minute on the various level of API. I was speaking about our intention to always move up here from the core system APIs that are sometimes even still a challenge with some of our core solutions. SAP is still sometimes a question mark, but we are striving and chasing it to make it happening. To some business API, where we are aiming at, and to have, for the consumer-facing API that are more and more easy to consume, seamless, and once again, guarantee a consumer experience very consistent, whatever the channel are. Very important in our industry, obviously. And now, we are coming a bit more on several things linked on our API marketplace. So to make that available, highly consumable, We make sure that we have obviously a catalog, which is open internally and externally, api.l'oreal.com. We make sure that we have a true life cycle management of this API, obviously. And that's where the third part is highly important for the last topic, which is sustainability. We have applied, developed, somehow from scratch, eco-design API guidelines and the way to promote them. So it's something shared, it's something open. We had some discussion with that. And we are very proud to make it as accessible as possible for any of you in the community, in the API community. All of that is obviously being permanently measured and controlled via the right dashboard. So how does it look like? It's an eco score that you can see. We are working also hand in hand with a French startup called Fruger, making that happening. We have the guidelines and we have created a score calculator in order to make this eco score possible. And in fact, and that will be the end of this discussion, it creates a loop back with what is L'Oréal in terms of DNA, in terms of sustainability applied to tech. We have a program on the tech which is on 3 aspects. The sustainable tech by design, and obviously this eco-conception of API is one of the clear assets of this part. As a matter of fact, any of the L'Oréal tech product must be eco-designed. Then we are now striving to look at the way to create tech for sustainability, so the way the tech can help us as a business to be always more sustainable. And here again, Open API can help us in order to make sure to have a better supply chain, to make sure to have a better design PLV, and so on and so on. And last but not least, and that's why any of the research we are doing are open, we want to go for an inclusive tech things, meaning we want to share and give that to the community. So as you have understood, we all have a role to play for a sustainable tech, API also. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So as a conclusion and a word for that, it's very impressive. I think we have shared a lot, and I think it was important to share this approach that starting from a clear, guided API strategy on which you combine your willingness at the same time to have a data-first strategy. At the end of the day, as sustainability is one of the top priorities of L'Oréal, you succeed to move and to have a leverage of your tech strategy for sustainability. And it's very concrete, it's very open. The Eco Score, I think you clearly show that you recommend to use some APIs versus others, and you enter into a virtuous circle because of the reuse, the nature of the APIs itself, and the data you have to be able to give the Eco Score. So it's something very innovative. We hope you enjoyed the success story of L'Oréal, and we can open for some Q&A. I don't know if we have time or not. Yeah?
Okay, thanks. So are there any questions? Oh, sorry. Are there any questions in the room? Okay, there is. Yeah, just speak up very loudly. I think that's the only thing we can do.
I think the question is, do you deprecate APIs which have a low score, Eco Score? Is it right?
So to tell the truth, it's not done yet. It's clearly our intention. Yes, that's why. So clearly, that's why I was speaking about the life cycle of APIs. A low score, which will, by the way, be a bad Eco Score, but certainly also a very low usage, because it goes together quite often, will be deprecated, yes. definitely.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, if not, please let's thank our speakers again. Thank you very much.